Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here joining us today. Many of you know that I am a neuropsychologist and I've spent the last 17 years evaluating kids who parents, pediatricians, or teachers suspect have learning or mental health challenges that are impacting their daily lives. For many of those kids, they get a diagnosis. And I know from 17 years of experience and from talking to my colleagues who do the same thing that I do, that it can be overwhelming for parents. Even when a report is well written and it clearly outlines the next steps in terms of recommendations, it is still a lot to take in for parents. And so I wanted to do an episode about 5 things to do after your child gets a diagnosis. I am joined today by 2 of our Child Nexus members, Shelley Lawrence and Sari Goodman, and we are going to walk you through what to do.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Sari and Shelley, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you both here. And as with many of the conversations I've had in the podcast, they usually stem from conversations I've had with parents and conversations I've had with other professionals. And we have talked about doing a podcast episode about what comes after your child gets a diagnosis. And, we discussed, let's just make it a podcast episode because this question comes up for so many parents once they get a diagnosis, either from their child's therapist. Sometimes it's the pediatrician or a pediatric psychiatrist. Sometimes it comes from the school. It may not be a formal diagnosis, but it might be your child has a specific learning disorder in reading. And, oftentimes parents don't know, well, what should I do once I get this information? And we have 5 things that parents can do. There are more than 5. I'll start by, that's my caveat. There are more than 5 things, but we pulled together a list of 5 things that parents should do after their child gets a diagnosis. And so I'm glad that you are both here to kind of share your wisdom and your experience in working with parents to help parents whose child has gotten a diagnosis, whatever that diagnosis might be, what it is that they should do. So I'm going to start off because I'm a neuropsychologist. I do these assessments to help parents better understand why their child is struggling. And at the end of that process, sometimes kids will get a diagnosis, not always, but sometimes they will get a diagnosis based on their performance during the assessment and from all the information I gather from parents and teachers. And, I meet with parents to go over the findings. I share with them their child's diagnosis if they have one and talk to them about what that looks like. And that is true for most people who do assessments with kids. And one of the things I would say that after you have that feedback meeting, one of the things that you should do, number 1, is to read and understand what is in the report. Because, kids went through this whole process of going through an assessment. Sometimes it's 2 days, sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's more. Parents spend a lot of time completing those rating forms. They're having a lot of discussions with the evaluator. Teachers are contributing information. You don't want that report to just sit on a shelf somewhere. And so understand what is in the report. How did the clinician come to their impressions and understanding of your child? What was the criteria that led them to this diagnosis? And then what does that mean in terms of your child's behavior at school, difficulties at home? What are your child's strengths? Where are they struggling? And what is the evaluator recommending for your child? So I think that understanding what is in the report, reading it first are key, is a key thing to do after you get the report.
I would agree. And and to ask questions, I think sometimes it's intimidating. There are a lot of words that have different meanings in education and on reports, and parents should feel like you're the child's advocate. And you need to understand what that report says in order to best help your child. So ask questions.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes you may not have the questions right there in the feedback session because it is a lot of information. And the questions that you might have might come a week later after you've met with the evaluator. So don't be shy about asking for a follow-up conversation to better understand.
Yeah, for sure.
So again, understanding, reading the report. Sari, what else do you suggest?
Well, I think sometimes that report is overwhelming for parents. You have people who are telling you they do include the positive things in your child's strengths. The emphasis of the report is on what are the challenges and what are the struggles, because that's the whole reason that you as parents pursued that in the beginning. But just hearing all those challenges and struggles and seeing it in writing is very overwhelming. You have to take a breath. You have to understand that you did this as your child's advocate. And you have to remember that the diagnosis is not your child. Your child is the same person that they were the day before the evaluation started and the day after the evaluation started. This hasn't changed your child. And you're not looking at your child any differently than, wow, you should actually pat yourselves on the back because what you did was you found out information. You now know more about your child than you ever did before. And now you can target that help that you're going to give your child. Now you can be very specific in what that help is. And so now you're a more knowledgeable parent and you have just become a much better advocate for your child.
Yeah, and I would just add on, Sari, that the report is power. It's information. And, you've invested all this time, money. You now understand your child better. And it's really important to share that knowledge with the school. So I always recommend figuring out who your go-to person is at the school. It might be a principal or a division head or a director of student services. And I encourage families to share the report or a version of the report. And then it's always recommended to have a meeting. Sometimes even the person who did the testing will come to really go over where are the child's strengths? How strong are they? Where are the areas of I'm going to call them areas of stretch? And how can we work together at school and at home as a team to support the child? And then I think it's important to have regularly scheduled meetings to follow up to see, okay, we might have preferential seating at school. How is that helping? The child may be getting OT. Is there benefit to that? And just to always make sure that all the actions we're taking are in service of the child.
Right. That's really important. And what's also important, just like you say, when you go to those meetings with the children, with the teachers and with the administration of the school, the progress means that the plan changes, right? It's not a static plan. As improvements happen, then you prioritize something else. Sometimes the reports have a lot of recommendations and it's overwhelming. And the fact is that there's all these recommendations. They're not necessarily meant to be all implemented at the same time, which is why communication with the neuropsychologist that did the testing is very important. And communication with the school is very important because you have to prioritize. And you have to prioritize for yourself as a parent. You might have other children. You can't be running to after-school therapies every single day of the week. It's also expensive. And also, your child needs play dates. They might be recommending educational therapy and occupational therapy and physical therapy and other therapies that are all very important to the progress of your child, but you have to realize they're not all meant to be done at the same time. Because think of your child as running around from one therapy to another. They need play dates. They need socialization. You can't do it all at one time. And so you get from your meeting and from your questions to the evaluator, if you had to prioritize which ones would be the most important to start, and the same with the school. Which ones are the most important to start? And then, like Shelley said, when you have periodic meetings, you look at, oh, we've made this progress. Now this becomes the new priority. And that's how it works.
And, one of the things that I've had experience with is we've, targeted at school, we'll give a child a certain support. Maybe we could do some reading support or some phonics support. And then the parents are freed up to do some other areas that we couldn't do at school. So sometimes that strategic approach is really helpful.
Absolutely. And, when you started talking, Shelley, about, sharing the report with the school, one of the things that came to mind is that there's so many parents who are afraid of sharing that report with the school. And I'd love for you to touch on that, because for some parents, they don't want to share the full report. And you, as someone who's had experience on the educator side and getting these reports, I'd love for you to speak on the importance of sharing that report.
Yeah, 100%. I always felt in my role as a school administrator that the information in the report was power for us. It was our roadmap to really helping the child and putting their needs at the center. And we would, as a team, go through it and say, okay, we've targeted this. What is our next step? And just parents would be concerned about, well, will other schools know about this? The practice is that any outside report is kept under lock and key, separate from the child's cumulative record. They're completely separate, and no one has access to that report without the parents' approval first. So the reports allowed us to be better educators for the child.
And on that note, also, when I'm working with parents, I find that there is a lot of fear, just as you said, Karen. There's a lot of fear of sharing the report. I think it comes from that fear that their child will be labeled and that people will treat their child differently. And there is some old-fashioned thinking. I think I'll call it old-fashioned thinking, where people will say that their child will be looked on as different. And I find that education today has come a long way in the type of attitude that we have towards helping all children. And that attitude has changed. And like Shelley said, teachers are happy to get that kind of direction. They're happy because sometimes they'll say, oh, that's what it is. Now I know. Now I can help this child. I've had children like this before. I know what to do, and they are relieved.
And it's the same way that parents are relieved, because now you realize, okay, my child is not deliberately trying to annoy me, right? This is impulsivity, right? They're not deliberately taking forever to come down the stairs and put on their shoes, and they're not deliberately forgetting their socks and leaving their books at school. This is working memory. This is a working memory problem. Now I can provide additional support. Now I understand this is not a behavioral problem. This is an underdeveloped frontal lobe, right? This is a working memory weakness. How can I use my child's strengths to help them? Well, they've got a spectacular visual memory. Let me put on a whiteboard, all of these reminders that will help my child. Like you said, Shelley, it's powerful.
Yeah. And it's the same in the classroom. Sometimes the teacher has a hypothesis, and that one little change, like, oh, let me put this child right in the front and let me have a little step card on their desk. All of a sudden, the routines are better internalized. And I would also add on having some type of what I'm going to call, or Mel Levine used to call, demystification for your child. Your child has gone through all this testing. Kids are smart. They know when they're struggling. I highly encourage parents to have their child sit down with the person who did the testing so that the neuropsychologist or the educational therapist or whoever it is can really talk to the child and show them their areas of strength and really, oh, you're really strong at math and you have a great visual memory, or however they'll say it in kid terms, and acknowledge that the child, oh, but reading's hard for you right now. And here are the things we're all going to do to help you. It's a relief for kids. They know when they're struggling. And I would say, especially some of our kids who have ADHD and they feel like they're bad or they're always in trouble. Oh, it's not you. It's just this part of your brain. Your frontal lobe isn't developed. And we're going to do some things to help you. We might set a timer. We might have some reminders. All those things are empowering for kids.
I agree. And also the parents will have an easier time. The more parents understand that report, I think that is the key here. The more parents understand the report and the process, the better they can explain it to their children.
Yes, because the children will have questions. I mean, they went through this process. They spent days with the clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist going through the testing. So they know that there was a reason why they went through all of that. To not share what the findings were can be very confusing and very anxiety provoking for kids, especially if then you decide to implement an intervention, but the child doesn't know why. Why am I going to educational therapy? Why am I now going to occupational therapy? Or why am I getting speech? That understanding does provide relief for a lot of students because they can understand why they need additional support.
And it's buy-in, well, wait a second, I'd rather go to my dance lesson or my chess class or whatever it is they want to do. And it's making sure that they have balance in their lives and they understand to what end and what is this doing for them. And also, once kids are started in intervention, really showing them their progress.
Yes.
And how far they're coming. And I think that is really powerful.
That's a big motivator for continuing with the intervention, and also really helps the child in terms of their self-concept and their self-esteem because they see their progress. They see that they're getting better. And it also shows the parents, how the extent to which their child is benefiting from the intervention and responding to the intervention in a positive way. So we have really touched on a number of things that parents should do. And, we've talked about making sure that you're reading and understanding what is in the report, that, if your child has dyslexia, that you understand what dyslexia is. If your child has been diagnosed with ADHD, how does that show up for your child? Because the other thing is that ADHD can look different in different kids. So that's why you just can't read a book about ADHD to understand your child, because it will look different in your child than it will in another child. So understanding your child's unique profile. Sari, you said realizing that this diagnosis does not change who your child is, which is so important. Your child is so much more than a diagnosis. It tells us a little bit about why they're struggling. And if there's a comprehensive evaluation, we also are able to identify their strengths, but it doesn't ultimately change who your child is. I love that you said your child is the same person that they were before the evaluation and who they are after the evaluation. That has not changed.
And I also think that that there are people that will help you understand that evaluation. There is the evaluator who did the evaluation, and like I said earlier, is please make sure you ask questions, and you don't have to ask questions. You'll find new questions and feel free to ask them. There's people like Shelley who help you work with schools. There's people like me, a parent educator with a background in education, years of education, who can help you take that report and implement things at home and help you understand point of view and how you can be an advocate. And one of the things Shelley and I both do is help parents learn how to be the parent at the parent conference of a child who has challenges. That's a whole different kind of parent conference. and takes a little bit of practice, but you can do it, and you can be a champion at helping your child.
And that's, that's a parent role. You're loving your child and you are your child's champion. You are your child's advocate. And part of that advocacy work is sharing this information with the school so that they can implement the recommendations that will help your child in the classroom setting, which is why, Shelley, you very eloquently and perfectly described the importance of sharing that information with the school.
And in my very long time as a school administrator, I have to say, when there was transparency and collaboration, we had amazing results.
Yes, me too. When there's a team, parents need to go in as a team. I'm here too. I'm willing to put the work in too. It's not just teachers, you do all the work, administrators, you do all the work. It's parents and teachers and administrators, we're a team. And I know it's a cliche, but you have to say it does take a village.
It really does.
And it's really putting the child and what's best for the child in the center of the conversation. Because that's who we're doing this for. It's in service of the child, their learning, and their social and emotional well-being.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why it's so important, like Sari, you said, to prioritize those recommendations, because it's not only about, having preferential seating in the classroom, but if we're looking at supporting them emotionally, if we're looking at also a co-occurring reading issue, we can't recommend 3 hours a day of a reading intervention if the attention is untreated, because how will that child be able to attend to the intervention? So that's why it's important to prioritize those recommendations. Let's address the attention first, and then we'll slowly increase the amount of time that's spent on the reading intervention. Again, we have to understand what's in the report, understand your child to know how to prioritize. And that is done, like you said, in communication with the evaluator.
100%. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
And then, Shelley, you mentioned something that's often forgotten, and that is sharing the information with the child. Of course, you are not going to be sharing it in the same way you share it with the parents. You're not going to be going through scores. You're not going to be talking about diagnoses in a lot of circumstances. Other times, it will be perfectly appropriate to share a diagnosis. But it's about helping the child better understand. It's a demystification, like you said, understand their learning profile, their strengths, where their areas of struggle are, and also providing, information about where they're going to get support. This has been a challenge for you. It's validation that you have been struggling. I've seen you struggle, but I also know that you are working very, very hard. That is a relief to so many students, because it's like somebody sees, somebody understands. I'm not lazy. I'm not a behavioral problem. This is hard and it makes me feel bad. And I'm so relieved that I'm going to get the help that I need.
And then a lot of times kids worry that they're dumb, and it's just how they see it in their mind, in their comparing brain. And it's just really reassurance. No, you're not. Look how strong you are. You are really a mathematician, and reading's a little harder for you, or writing's a little harder for you. And here are the things we're going to do to strengthen those areas.
And I think that one of the things I think is intimidating to parents is when they do get the report and when they do communicate with the professionals. Think about it. Shelley and I, we've been school administrators. We have years and years and years of experience, teachers, neuropsychologists, clinical psychologists. We speak a language, and sometimes we forget that we're talking to people whose profession is other than ours. And it can become intimidating. I know if I'm sitting in a meeting with, investment people, I'm at a loss. I'm feeling really dumb. So I think that we have to remember that we have that's one of the reasons why we're having these programs, is to provide parents with information so they can feel as an expert in their child. You don't have to be an expert in everything about education. You just have to be an expert in your child. And we can give that to you. We can help you with that.
Absolutely. And that education about your child's struggles is such an important piece. There's actually been research in Canada, the US, and in Europe that show that families who get that information, that education about their child's learning profile and, have a deeper dive into understanding dyslexia or ADHD or anxiety disorders and what those behaviors look like and what those symptoms look like and how the intervention helps, it results in greater parent knowledge about how your child's diagnosis, how their symptoms influence their behavior, and actually improves adherence to treatment. Again, like you were saying, you get buy-in from the child because now their parents are not only advocating for them at school, the child is getting their accommodations and modifications at school, but at home, their parents understand how to support them at home because the support doesn't end at the end of the school day. It has to carry over at home for the child to continue to feel supported and to get what they need.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a change in your parenting style. And it can be challenging. You might not want to have a weekly schedule or take the time, but it's all in benefit of the child. And it's helping them not only to function better at school, but also to function better at home and have a better family life experience.
That is so important, that family life. And it's like, again, there's been research to show that, quality of life is so important for all families, but parents whose kids have learning challenges, learning disabilities, their stress levels are higher, right? And what we know is that when parents have education about their child's learning profile and they have social support, they have a more positive emotional relationship with their child. And that is so important for the home environment and for the home life.
And the other thing to consider along those lines also is that it helps you recognize your child's strengths. And a child who recognizes their own strengths and doesn't see themselves as less than, parents can capitalize on those strengths and really promote. And then children learn from their strengths. They strengthen their weaknesses through their strengths. So it's a feel-good opportunity when you're really very specific. Maybe your child's athletic. Maybe your child has really strong visual processing skills, and art is the way to go, or kinesthetic skills and movement is the way to go. And you find those things out, and then you also say, "Oh, let's pursue that." That creates a very positive family dynamic.
And it's, really us as parents, we have to parent the child we have. And this is what this information is all about, is being the best parent for each of our children. And every kid is different and every child needs something different, both at school and at home.
This is what, talking to you both, this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about working with you both on these learning groups, because you understand the parent side and the education side and the need for the integration of those things and the collaboration between home and school. When we talked about launching these parent groups, these learning groups for parents, it was so exciting because I can see all of the information that we have coming together in a way that will help families better support their kids who learn and think differently, who may have social emotional challenges. And I've already had parents who email me and say, these podcast episodes are helpful, but I want more. I want a more intimate and personalized experience. And voila, you both came and said, yes, I'm on board for this. Yes, I'm willing to help these parents. And I'm so excited about what we're going to do in January. And then you also get the community. We talked about how social support is so important for parents to have that support. And then when we have this educational experience in the format of a group, you also get to hear from other parents what's working, what's not working, and to realize that as a parent, you're not alone in having some of the struggles that you have when you're parenting a neurodiverse child.
Yeah, it's the same reaction that sometimes children have when they're in a group and they realize, oh, there's other kids here who have the same thing. I'm normal. And parents get the same experience being in a group with other parents, and they get to say, oh, we're normal. This is just part of being a family.
Absolutely. It's part of parenting. It's part of the parenting journey, right?
Right.
But we want to make it easier for parents to go through that process.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. It's being the best parent for our child and helping to be their best advocate.
Absolutely. Sari and Shelley, thank you so much for being here, for sharing all of your expertise, all of your knowledge. And it's just such a benefit to parents to have this information and to be equipped with the information, because one of the things I say is when parents are equipped with information and knowledge, then they can make the best decisions for their children, whether that be advocating for them at home, advocating for them at school, supporting them at home, and determining what other additional supports that their child needs and how to balance their day. Because like you said, Sari, it's not about having a full schedule of occupational therapy, speech therapy, educational support. They need to have play dates. They need to spend time with their friends. They need to play basketball or volleyball or run track. They need to be able to do other things that they enjoy and to develop those talents that they absolutely have.
Exactly.
They need balanced lives.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you again for being here. And I appreciate you and can't wait to work on these groups with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to meeting all these wonderful parents and helping them and learning from them. That we learn from parents just like parents learn from us.
I hope that you found the information that we shared in this episode helpful. Studies show that psychoeducation as an intervention leads to improvement in ADHD symptoms and behavioral problems as reported by parents. When parents have greater knowledge about their child's struggles, it can lead to an increase in understanding and an improvement in adherence and response to treatment. The research also shows that parent psychoeducation and learning group programs are effective in helping parents to establish a more positive emotional relationship with their children who have learning disorders. What we want to do is to reduce the high levels of parenting stress, increase knowledge and understanding about ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety disorders, increase social support through a community. We want to decrease what one of my colleagues called Facebook parenting, where a parent asks a question in a group and may get misinformation from well-meaning parents. We value parents and we know your struggles. We also know that you know your child better than anyone else. So we want to help you help and advocate for your child and increase the harmony in your home life. If this sounds like something you're interested in, be sure to check out the show notes where you can find a link to where you can register for our learning groups. We are running 3 groups beginning in January, and we are limiting each group to no more than 15 parents so that you get a personalized experience and FaceTime with professionals and experts. I am so excited about this, and I hope you'll join us. I can't wait to meet you.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.